Character analysis. 1. Indian. The character, Indian, in George Ryga'S play, Indian, serves as a powerful representation of the indigenous peoples of Canada, highlighting their struggles, identity crisis, and alienation in their own land. 1. Indian's name is intentionally left unspecified to emphasize the broader theme of the identity struggle faced by many First Nations individuals. 1. He is depicted as a laborer, working as a temporary employee for his boss, Watson, on a farm in Alberta. Indian's physical appearance, with short hair, delicate skin, skin-tight jeans, and cowboy boots, reflects the blending of traditional indigenous culture with Western influences. He is a complex character, facing not only physical hardships but also deep emotional turmoil due to the marginalization and discrimination he experiences under the dominance of the white settlers. Through Indians' dialogue and actions, George Ryga'S vividly portrays the helplessness and poverty experienced by the indigenous people. Indians suffering from a severe headache and stomach trouble is symbolic of the pain and anguish endured by the First Nations communities due to the oppression and cultural erasure brought on by colonialism. Moreover, Indians' lack of a specific name reflects the loss of identity faced by many indigenous individuals as their traditional names and cultural practices were suppressed by the colonial masters. He struggles with the question of his own identity and represents the broader struggle of the indigenous population in Canada to maintain their cultural heritage in the face of assimilation policies. Indians' interactions with Watson and Agent further reveal the harsh realities of his life. Watson's callousness and disregard for Indians' well-being, threatening him with violence and displaying a lack of empathy, expose the deep-rooted racism and oppression faced by the First Nations people from the white settlers. On the other hand, Agent, representing the Bureau of Indian Affairs, is a symbol of the institutional control exerted over the indigenous population. In conclusion, Indian is a multifaceted character embodying the suffering, resilience, and yearning for identity experienced by the indigenous communities in Canada. George Ryga'S masterfully crafts this character to shed light on the injustices faced by the First Nations people and to highlight the urgent need for recognition, understanding, and reconciliation in Canadian society. 1. Watson. Watson is an important character in George Ryga'S play, Indian. He is Indian's boss and a farmer on whose land Indian is working as a temporary laborer. 1. Watson represents the white settler class that holds power and control over the indigenous population in Canada. Watson's demeanor towards Indian is characterized by hostility, racism, and a complete lack of empathy. He exhibits a callous and abusive attitude towards Indian, treating him as less than human, and uses his authority to exploit and mistreat him. Watson's negative attitude towards Indian reflects the broader historical relationship between the white settlers and the indigenous people, marked by colonization, marginalization, and dispossession. Throughout the play, Watson's actions and dialogue demonstrate his lack of concern for Indians' well-being. He yells at Indian for not working fast enough, threatens him with violence, and refuses to provide basic amenities or care for his health. This callous behavior is indicative of the systemic discrimination and oppression faced by the indigenous population in Canada at the hands of colonial powers. Watson's treatment of Indians' friends, particularly Alphonse, whom he imprisons for his own safety, further exemplifies his authoritative and paternalistic approach towards the indigenous people. He sees them as inferior and incapable of making decisions for themselves, reinforcing the power dynamics inherent in colonial relationships. By portraying Watson in such a negative light, George Ryga'S critiques the exploitative and oppressive nature of colonialism and exposes the stark realities of the indigenous people's lives. Watson serves as a representative of the broader white settler society that perpetuated the marginalization and alienation of the First Nations communities. 1. Agent. Agent is another significant character in George Ryga'S play, Indian. He is a civil servant working for the Bureau of Indian Affairs, symbolizing the bureaucratic system that was responsible for administering colonial policies and controlling the lives of the indigenous people. As a representative of the government, Agent embodies the institutionalized oppression faced by the indigenous communities. He appears at the farm where Indian is working, purportedly to check on the situation and address any concerns. However, his presence reflects the surveillance and oversight that the colonial authorities exercised over the First Nations people. Throughout the play, Agent's interactions with Indian reveal a condescending and dismissive attitude. He treats Indian with a sense of superiority, asking probing questions about Indians' identity and displaying little understanding of the cultural and emotional complexities faced by the indigenous people. Agent's insistence on knowing Indians' name underscores the colonial practice of replacing indigenous names with European ones, further erasing their cultural identities. Indians' refusal to give his name can be seen as an act of resistance, symbolizing the indigenous people's struggle to maintain their unique identities in the face of colonial assimilation. While Agent's presence may appear benign, his role as a representative of the Bureau of Indian Affairs signifies the systemic oppression and control exerted by the government over the indigenous communities. He represents the larger machinery of colonialism that perpetuated the suffering and dispossession of the First Nations people. George Ryga'S portrayal of Agent serves as a critique of the bureaucratic institutions that were instrumental in implementing colonial policies and marginalizing the indigenous population. Through Agent, Ryga highlights the devastating impact of colonialism on the lives and identities of the First Nations people and emphasizes the need for recognition, justice, and reconciliation in Canadian society.